in all presentations, I will just offer short prayers of invocation. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurin Militam Jena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Presthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamin iti namine namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatadeshatarine Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gradharu Sivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Jai Sri Prabhupada ki. And now I'm able to see our Padmamukha Nimai, who is our gracious host. Hare Krishna.
Sorry, Maharaj, to be late due to my bad internet connection. Fortunately,
yes.
good connected at last.
No problem. These things are expected, not uncommon. So anyways, I'm very happy to get this opportunity to be with you and whoever else is online to speak on the subject matter of Namahatta, especially, I believe, regarding the pioneering days of Namahatta. So are there any specific questions, or you want me to just kind of like begin, or?
Yeah. Hare Krishna. So we are very fortunate and glad today to get amongst us one of the special personality who is there with us in the mission of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in the form of Krishna consciousness movement worldwide from the beginning day, the pioneering days of preaching, Nama-hatta congregational preaching. So as we see that Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he himself came and his main mission was going on with the congregational development was going on since that time. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Nityananda Prabhu, Advaita Acharya Prabhu, the huge Sankirtan party. So, and then Nityananda Prabhu came, and then this Nama-hatta congregational preaching. So it came in that lineage, and we received it. But thing is that the people who received it in the beginning days in our Krishna consciousness movement and took it forward are very special, and they did their hard work, and the challenges they accepted and they faced and they overcame with them. One of the great personalities, His Holiness Bhakti Raghava Swami Maharaj. He is one of the initiating spiritual master of International Society for Krishna Consciousness, and he is one of the commander in the army of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's congregational development and preaching worldwide. So today we'll listen interesting stories, interesting insights from Maharaj experiences in congregational development in Nama-hatta preaching since the beginning of 18 ISKCON worldwide, specifically in India, in Bengal, and in worldwide, wherever Maharaj is preaching. So Maharaj, thank you very much for kindly agreeing to be with us and give your valuable time to us. And this, like we just had Nityananda Trayodashi, and Nityananda Prabhu is, we can say, the personification of preaching. Like we see that Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gave this specific instruction to Nityananda Prabhu and Haridas Thakur to preach at every door. Door se prati ghare ghare giya karo ei bhikya. Go at door to door and preach. So we get the best blessing from Nityananda Prabhu by helping him in preaching and through his this shown path. So Maharaj, thank you very much again to kindly agree to be with us and share your wisdom with us. So Maharaj, please, we would like to hear first of all that what is this congregational preaching in general, and what is the difference between congregational preaching, or what is the unique feature of congregational preaching with any other thing or any other mode of preaching?
Okay. Hare Krishna.
Yes.
Thank you, Prabhu. In the early days, actually, of the Nama-hatta program, many devotees, I would say, especially those from outside of India, even many from inside India also, could not so easily understand about the Nama-hatta program. Of course, possibly because we were referring to this program using the words Nama-hatta, which of course is very much, as you rightly pointed out, uh, directly connected with congregational preaching. Uh, we could say outreach to congregation, which is basically the mission of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has appeared to introduce the Sankirtan movement, as we all know. And Sankirtan means actually congregation. So the unique feature, of course, of the Nama-hatta program that is known within our ISKCON society under the Ministry of Congregational Preaching, Congregational Development, is basically an extension of what this great personality, as we know, one of our foremost acharyas, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, took up actually in the 19th century, which basically is reaching out and involving as many people as possible in taking up the direct mission of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in terms of becoming committed to the chanting of the holy name. The whole basis is to actually get people to chant the holy name, the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, which is, as we all know, the Yuga Dharma for this age of Kali. The special and unique feature of congregational preaching, especially connected with Nama-hatta, was how, in a very innovative way, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and he wrote this, of course, in his Godrum Kalpatavi, as we know, which was translated by His Holiness Jayapataka Maharaj. And this is continuing within our own ISKCON society as well, reaching out to as many people to become very much involved, fully involved in the preaching mission of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So in a nutshell, it is giving that opportunity by following in the footsteps of both Nityananda Prabhu and Haridas Thakur, to whom Lord Chaitanya, as you rightly said a little earlier, Shono Shono Nityananda, Shono Haridas, Sarvatra Amaragya Koraha Prakash, and that whole instruction of going, sending them door to door, village to village, town to town, city to city, all over the world, to bring them to the fold of Krishna consciousness.
Yeah, that's great to hear about that. Actually, that when we hear about congregation and preaching, that yes, the word congregation, that itself says that something collectively, everybody is together. So, Maharaj, can you just throw some light on that? How the beauty of being together in the mission of Lord Chaitanya's movement?
Ultimately, we all know and understand that every living entity is part of Krishna's eternal spiritual family. And we know how the family nucleus in our Vedic culture is something that is very sacred. And we could say the first congregation that we all experience as individuals are being part, if we are fortunate, of a Krishna conscious family. And of course, that's one of the objectives and purposes of the movement established by Srila Prabhupada in continuation of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's movement, is to actually give that opportunity to be part of that initial congregation within a small family, and then understand gradually how we are meant to be part of that larger eternal family of Krishna devotees. And therefore, we also know from our acharyas how in this Kali Yuga, unless we are part of a congregation, we, because of the heavy influence, negative influence, and pressures of Kali Yuga, individually, it is practically impossible to practice Krishna consciousness. So the special feature of Kali Yuga, of course, is that, and this is what Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is giving us, that opportunity to congregate together where we can support one another, where we can associate with one another. And as Srila Rupa Goswami nicely explains in the Nectar of Devotion, Nectar of Instruction actually, that there are meant to be these natural exchanges, loving exchanges between devotees. So congregational preaching is giving us that opportunity to be part of this wonderful family of devotees. And the more people we can bring in, the more the Lord becomes satisfied, because his mission in this world is to reclaim all the conditioned souls who have forgotten their natural and eternal relationship with him. Yeah.
So, can you, Maharaj, throw some light on us that how Srila Prabhupada, he emphasized on congregational preaching practically from the beginning days, how ISKCON started with congregation?
Srila Prabhupada spoke, basically introduced the movement of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Even before going to the West, he, as we know, in Jhansi, he started his League of Devotees. So League of Devotees also means congregation. Srila Prabhupada also wrote this essay, which is less known even to this day within our ISKCON society, called the Gita Nagari. The essay, a short essay called Gita Nagari, whereby he describes actually this ideal community of devotees who are focused on practicing and following the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita. Gita Nagari means that place, that village, that community where all the members are conversant with the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita. And this is what Lord Chaitanya also instructed. Bolo Krishna, Bhaja Krishna, Koro Krishna Shika. That we learn the science of Krishna consciousness. So Srila Prabhupada, he did this in a most wonderful way, even before going to the West. And then, of course, as we all know, going to the Western world, traveling extensively all over the world, he established so many centers. He also established not only city centers, but he emphasized the need and the importance of having communities. Communities means rural communities, because that's also a very, I would say, important dimension of congregational preaching. The original and natural congregation that we see within our Vedic culture, because Vedic culture, as we know, is agrarian culture, therefore is in the village. I mean, the original, we could say, prototype, or the original example is in Vrindavan, isn't it? The ideal community, the ideal congregation is what we see in Vrindavan Dham, and where all the residents are focused on Krishna, where they're meditating on Krishna, where they're serving Krishna. So our whole mission, the whole mission that Prabhupada took up, was to give that message, to introduce the practice of Krishna consciousness, and to bring people together. Prabhupada would say, I established these temples to facilitate people to come and hear about Krishna and take up the process of Krishna consciousness. Yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful to know that, Maharaj. So, as Sridham Mayapur is the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, is ISKCON's headquarters, and main preaching, Srila Prabhupada wanted to, Srila Prabhupada established it with his great ambition to spread this preaching. So, would like to request you to share some of your experiences, how it started in Sridham Mayapur. We know that you were in Sridham Mayapur for long years since your beginning, and then how this congregation, the Nama-hatta, originated and started and expanded from Sridham Mayapur.
Okay. Yes, I was fortunate to come to India actually in 1976, and a few years after, actually, in 1979, I recall I had been involved in as a director of New Bhakti program, and His Holiness Jayapataka Maharaj had come across the writing of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, the Godram Kalpatavi, as we mentioned a little earlier, and he called a meeting at one point, and I happened to be part of that meeting, wherein he introduced the basic concept of Namahatta, and that this is something that we should start from Sri Mayapur, and in this way we can get the blessings of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. So that same year, it was, I believe, in September of 1979, we officially began the Nama-hatta program. We set up a small office. At that time, obviously, practically no one knew about Nama-hatta, and we just had a few devotees. It's very interesting how some of those new initial devotees are still in Mayapur, still connected with the Nama-hatta program. That's after 40 years, right? I mean, 1979, and here we are in 2021. So one of the first pioneers of the Nama-hatta program was Gauranga Prem, at that time Brahmachari. He has since, as we know, taken sannyas. So His Holiness Gauranga Prem Maharaj continues to be an inspiration in the Nama-hatta program. Also, a much younger devotee at that time, Gaura Chandra Prabhu, he joined in the early, actually he joined, he was too young to join. He was only maybe 14 years of age, I believe. He was from Orissa, and he was told that actually you're too young, you have to go back, to your village, which he did. And then he came back and joined as full-time devotee. And he has also, I believe, last year or the year before, taken sannyas in Sridham Mayapur. So these were the two main devotees who, from the very beginning, were serving in Sridham Mayapur. And there was no budget at that time. There were no facilities. There was just a few devotees who had some little understanding of the program. And basically, we would go out traveling to different villages. Of course, Mayapur, as we know, being the birthplace of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and everyone in Bengal practically knowing about Lord Chaitanya, Mayapur, at our temple, so many people would visit. So when the program started, we would meet many people in Sridham Mayapur, bring them to our office, sign them up on the spot practically. And so in this way, in September, things started. And the first main event that took place was the following year in 1980, when we had what is called the Nama-hatta Mela, which became an annual event, which brought together on a yearly basis. This would take place in the month of April. It coincided with the festival commemorating His Holiness Jayapataka Maharaj's appearance. And in this way, people would come, and it was a very, very wonderful time, because many people did not know so much about Mayapur. And just by, we know by visiting Mayapur, spending a few days in the Holy Dham, people become inspired, and they take up to the chanting of the holy name. So that's how things started. We were given a very small facility at that time, and the long building had recently been finished. So in the Chakra building, we were given 2 rooms way at the end, actually. And in this way, things started. Yeah.
So, was there any kind of struggle in the initial days to that?
Struggle, whenever, I mean, in Krishna consciousness, whenever some new program begins, not, I would say, not really major struggle, except that we had very few devotees, didn't have much of facilities. I mean, we didn't have any vehicle or anything. But I personally, I didn't find it any kind of major struggle. It's part of our mission to travel and to preach. I suppose the struggle a little bit was somewhat of a challenge to to go to different places, especially in the early beginning, because there were no devotees. So prasadam was an issue. Who would prepare prasadam? Because not everyone was vegetarian, and there was also some little opposition. I would say. Maybe within 1 or 2 years, when we started preaching, and at that time, of course, within our ISKCON society, His Holiness Japtak Maharaj was already initiating a guru from soon after the departure of Srila Prabhupada in 1977. So in certain places, like in North Bengal, North Bengal is somewhat remote, let's say, to compared to Calcutta or other places, and therefore seeing foreigners coming in their villages, and especially giving diksha or initiation, there were reservations and opposition even at times. People thought that this was like a camouflage. People are being converted into Christianity in a kind of a camouflage manner. All kinds of different thoughts were there. But in general, I would say people whom we came in contact with were quite receptive. It was an exception that there were these kind of oppositions. And because the program was very attractive, the Nama-hatta Mela, there was a yearly, as I mentioned, in Mayapur, an annual gathering of all of the Nama-hatta Sanghas. And it was also a special event in North Bengal. Every year, Japtak Maharaj would travel in a special van with like a caravan of devotees, and and would tour the various Nama-hatta Sanghas. So that was very significant and very attractive. And in this way, many people, many villages actually connected, and within a few years, we had registered quite a large number of Nama-hatta Sanghas. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's wonderful how it started. So when you would go to some village, suppose it's far from Mayapur, 100 kilometers far from Mayapur, you're going there, maybe 50 kilometers far from Mayapur, going there, making some program with them, or maybe inviting them once in a while in Mayapur. So what would be okay, we can understand the connection, we can connect them, but then how to cultivate them? How do you think of cultivating them in the long term?
Yes. The whole purpose, of course, was to bring them closer to the mission that Srila Prabhupada began, and which is a continuing mission, of course, of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So what is most important to cultivate individuals was to keep in contact with them. So that meant going once they were registered as Namahatta Sanghas to to have our devotees visit them as often as possible. And gradually, of course, our number of devotees over the years increased. And of course, now it's a very large number of devotees who are more regularly maintaining contact and cultivating them. So we also had the Bhagavad Darshan and other uh, literatures translated in Bengali more and more. This was, of course, very helpful as well. And one of the most powerful ways in which people were cultivated, of course, was to, whenever the opportunity was there, to bring them to Sridham Mayapur. And in this way, they could see, you know, and experience the whole atmosphere of Sridham Mayapur with so many devotees, not only from Bengal, but from all over the world, because we're an international society. So we would cultivate them in these different ways by keeping personal contact with them. And many people naturally became very much attached. And I mean, not only attached, they became committed by becoming full-time devotees, by taking initiation, etc., like that. Yeah.
Yes. So just now we can see that lots of technological development. We have now online, WhatsApp, Facebook, and whatnot. So
Yeah.
now if we go for teaching somewhere, we can get that personal contact. We can talk to them. We can send messages, WhatsApp messages. We can make some small group, WhatsApp groups, and all. But those days, these things are not existing. So then, how do
Yeah.
you think of keeping contact with them?
Well, the only the only way to keep in contact was to actually go and visit them, and you know, depending on we didn't have that many devotees, as I mentioned, but it's just like our Gaurachandra Prabhu, who's now Maharaj. Even when I was visiting Mayapur, maybe like 2 years ago or last year, even yeah, last year. He's practically never in Mayapur. He's out. He prefers actually to be out, and there's a great need for that as well. His whole training, his whole experience has been to be out of Mayapur. I spent most of my time also outside of Mayapur, which which is wonderful because we come in contact with these people who are eager to know about Krishna consciousness, who are you know, people in villages, as we know, especially, you know, going back 40 years ago, it was much more that situation. People were much more innocent than maybe today, you know. So I remember spending the majority of my time outside, and I believe most of the devotees. So in this way, that was the best way through which our Namahatta members would be cultivated. They would get this personal association of the devotees, and in this way they would be nourished and would continue and take up more seriously their practice of Krishna consciousness. Few people are writing some questions, I think. Oh, I'm going to read something here. That's on my chat. I think somebody is sharing this. Namahatta in Mayapur is so huge, not so much in other countries or other temples in India. Why does Namahatta appear more successful in West Bengal than
The
anywhere
internet
else?
broke
Huh?
down.
Looks like our yeah, some little difficulty here in communication with our host, Padmamukha Prabhu. So maybe I can just comment on a little bit on this
Yes.
question. In many ways, like when I started going in the villages, I could anyone who travels in Bengal in the villages immediately understands immediately
book some
understand.
question is what question is.
Hare Krishna. Immediately can see how in the villages people are already chanting the holy name, are already playing mridanga and cartels. They know so many things about Lord Chaitanya because Lord Chaitanya is from Bengal. So it's quite natural. It's quite, it's to be expected that people in Bengal especially know about the Nama-hatta program and in many ways are following at least the chanting of the holy name. And Nama-hatta, of course, over the years also took on some other aspects in terms of becoming known as Bhakti Vriksha. Bhakti Vriksha is
Yes, yes.
basically the same ideology or concept of bringing people together, having them take up the chanting of the holy name, etc., like that. So that's just a few points regarding this question that was put up here on the chat. The other one I'm looking at here, I see our Padmamukha Prabhu is frozen here on the screen. That means he's having some internet issues. I'll read the second question. Unless somebody stops me, I'll just continue here. Do you think Namahatta would have been better understood universally if it was instead the Bengali name and it rather be called Marketplace of the Holy Name? Well, whenever we speak about Namahatta, we generally end up speaking or mentioning that it originates from, of course, Nityananda Prabhu and then Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. I don't think the name makes that major difference. It's a question of properly presenting it and explaining how it is basically the mission of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Yes. Yeah. So our Padmamukha Prabhu's still experiencing some little. You can put any questions you may have, Padmamukha Nimai Prabhu, on the chat because your voice is not coming through. So Namahatta, of course, as was mentioned a little earlier, is known and practiced in maybe obviously less than in Bengal, in other parts of India, in other countries, and the congregational preaching ministry is very active in so many ways all over the world, and so although maybe the name Namahatta may be less used in other countries, the basic ideology of introducing people to the mission of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is very much there through the congregational preaching of the holy name. So
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I am here.
Yes.
Sorry for my. So yeah, I was hearing you on Facebook when I am out of Zoom here.
Okay.
I was getting your answer from Facebook.
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you for nice answer, Maharaj. So Srila Prabhupada, actually we don't see much he directly use the term Namahatta or of course the congregational preaching was there without mentioning about it. So when the official terminology of Namahatta and preaching all came, so that what was the worldwide reaction of worldwide ISKCON of the devotees that okay, something new came, or what is this? Prabhupada didn't tell us about this. So was there any kind of such kind of reaction or such kind of responses?
I remember putting up a book table. I think maybe Gaur Purnima 2000, not 2000, Gaur Purnima probably 1980, because as I mentioned, 1979 is when we started the program. So I was very enthusiastic, of course, and wanted everyone to know about the Nama-hatta program. And definitely that first year, 1980, which was the first, we could say, Gaur Purnima where Namahatta was existing, most people, most devotees, especially from foreign countries, they were very confused. Confused means that they didn't know what it was, and they didn't take interest. And it took some time, actually. It took some time for our devotees to understand about the Namahatta program. And but over the years, as the Ministry for Congregational Development was established, then more people, are knowing about it. Now, Namhatta is, a congregational program very much linked and connected with Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. And I think it's helpful for us to try and understand Namhatta and, for that matter, other congregational programs in the context of what we call Varnasrama Dharma. I mean, somebody wrote how Namhatta is like in Mayapur and in Bengal especially is huge. Well, if we look at the term, for example, Varnasrama Dharma, that's also huge. So maybe that would require possibly another conversation or another period to explain in the larger context. But essentially, very important for us as devotees to understand what is the what is the long-term vision and the long-term objective of the movement of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and for that matter of Srila Prabhupada, isn't it? And
Yes.
I think we cannot avoid, because it is so fundamental to the preaching mission of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and so fundamental to what is dharma as well. And Krishna explains in the Bhagavad Gita, dharma samstapanarthaya sambhavami yuge yuge. I appear in this world actually to reestablish the principles of dharma. So just very briefly, when we speak of dharma, we cannot avoid speaking about Varnasrama Dharma. And in many ways, that is like a Maha congregation, in the sense that Vedic culture is primarily an agrarian culture. I was mentioning about Vrindavan. Vrindavan is our model, isn't it? Vrindavan Dham. Lord Krishna performs his pastimes in Vrindavan, and we are, Prabhupada wanted us, he directly told us, make like Vrindavan, develop communities like Vrindavan. Gita Nagari is very much like that. So I would say that in addition to congregation development, or maybe another aspect or facet of congregational development is what we call village development. Of course, that's a whole major topic in itself, and I think that we probably don't have very much time to get into that, but maybe we could keep that for the future. But basically, a congregation, I was giving the example of a family. Our first congregation is a family, isn't it?
Yes.
And of course, a family is generally living somewhere, either in a village or in a city. What's important for us to understand as devotees and as a movement is that the ideal place or ideal living arrangement, which Prabhupada emphasized also, and which is also glorified and explained in our Vedic culture, is village life. And if I can just mention very briefly, we have a major problem around the world. We means the whole world. The major problem around the world is that we have become and are becoming more and more what we call urbanized. Urbanized. When we become urbanized, we disconnect with our roots. Our roots in the Vedic culture are very much connected with land and with cows. Vrindavan village is a community of people who are living this ideology that Prabhupada spoke about of simple living and high thinking, where we are connected with land and cows and where more easily we can actually cultivate and practice Krishna consciousness. But as I mentioned, this is a very big topic. So yeah, we could save it for
Yes.
another time. Yeah.
Yes, thank you very much. We are looking forward for that
Yeah.
topic also as well, to cover that up so that we can cover up the Namahatta or congregational preaching and that Varnasram in general.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll go to the history of Namahatta. Like how did Namahatta come, or like the coin, the phrase Namahatta, where do we get it from, or the concept of Namahatta? What does that mean actually? It's a Bengali word, Namahatta. So what is the concept of Namahatta? Namahatta exactly?
Yes. Well, briefly, we mentioned how it is very much based on this writing of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, who who put it in a small book called Godram Kalpatavi, the marketplace of the holy name. This was something very, I mean, very unique, I would say, and based on the wonderful realizations of that great, Vaishnavacharya, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, which is also, of course, even before his time, connected with Nityananda Prabhu, who also spoke about Namahatta. So uh, it is basically a particular, in the case, if we look at the Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, it's a particular preaching, we could say, uh, technique that he introduced, whereby he personally would be traveling and assigning various individuals, taking on different responsibilities for the preaching movement. It was very unique, I would say, to his time, and very unique to that personality of Bhaktivinoda Thakur. But essentially, if we look at the underlying concept and underlying principle, it basically is giving maximum opportunity for maximum number of people to be involved and connected with the overall preaching mission of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Those who are interested to know more about details of the Godram Kalpatavi, it's on the folio on the database, so one can actually download that. And I mean, the book has also been translated by Japtak Maharaj and is available, I believe, in Mayapur and possibly other places as well. So it was Namahatta as such is a very innovative style of preaching as introduced by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and which is in many ways continuing through the congregational development ministry that we have here in our ISKCON society today.
So related to that, one question came from social media.
Yep.
That it seems that Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur coined the name Namahatta. Is there any reference to the exact name in scriptures previous to Bhaktivinoda Thakur's times around Lord Chaitanya's?
I'm not familiar with any direct reference like in the Puranas or something like that. And I think we need to take into consideration that acharyas at different times will be innovative in presenting the basic philosophy of Krishna consciousness, and by their level of understanding and realization, will in this way find ways to involve more people. So I'm not familiar. And someone mentioned, possibly you did, a little while ago, that Prabhupada, as such, to my knowledge, did not speak about Namahatta. That does not, of course, minimize its importance, but the Namahatta program was very, I would say, unique and very special to the personality, namely Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, who made it popular during his preaching days when he was traveling from village to village. Yeah.
Another question from social media that, okay, based on this conversation, I understand that Namahatta at present is mainly referring to the village congregation movement, with many centers focused in city preaching. How can we continue to propagate these Namahatta programs in villages? What will happen if Namahatta or village programs happen much for ISKCON society?
That's an interesting question. And the idea is that the basic ideology or principles of Namahatta is not only for villages. And that's why, as I mentioned earlier, and as we all know, we have within the congregational ministry Bhakti Vriksha program, which is there. Basically, very similar initiative in terms of giving that opportunity for people to practice Krishna consciousness. We have. I think it's important to mention. I was referring to that a few seconds ago. We have a major social crisis around the world today with the way we are developing in different countries through this increased urbanization. And there's a point to be made regarding villages. The question is, is Namahatta meant to be primarily for villages, because Namahatta became popular, especially in Bengal, through the villages, which is, the undeniable reality. That's the registered entities of Namahatta. If one was to look at what is the situation now, at least during when I was involved in the preaching up until 1986, I think 100% of our Namahattas were from the villages. So I was making the point earlier how our Vedic culture is meant to be an agrarian culture. Agrarian culture means village culture. And therefore, this is an aspect or a dimension which is still not discussed very much unless understood. But again, to explain it fully, it would require, I would say, a different conversation and a different context. I would say that, we have a ministry here in India. It's a national ministry for Varnasrama development. And one of the primary, I would say, emphasis is to reach out to villages. There's a very urgent need for us as a society, ISKCON society, to actually serve our villages. The villages, not only here in India but around the world, are in extreme danger. And when we understand that our Vedic culture is primarily a village-based culture, where we are more, on a daily basis, we interact with the land, we interact with the cows, we grow our own food, we learn about self-sufficiency, etc. So this is a major contrast with what is happening in the world today. And therefore, we should, recently means last year, I sent a proposal to our leaders here in India. And of course, this could have been sent to all the leaders around the world, whereby I requested that they form a committee to focus on the whole aspect of Varnashram pertaining to village development. Very, very important. So Namahatta is very much part of that. And this requires, I would say, more discussion, so that our devotees who are less familiar with either Namahatta or possibly also less familiar with Varnasrama Dharma can have a more clear understanding about that. Yeah.
So there is a question from Vaishak S. Krishnan that Hare Krishna Maharaj, Dandavat Pranams. During these unprecedented times, where self-sufficiency is a big question, where farm communities are unaffected, can we understand establishing farms in the form of congregational preaching? Kindly enlighten Maharaj.
Okay, nice question. Thank you for the question. Obviously, automatically, when we establish farm communities, and I would say better to refer or better to think about establishing villages. Farm communities are actually meant to be a stepping stone to establishing villages, which is the standard. The standard, we could say, community, the standard Vedic community are villages. And it's extremely important. I mean, you raise this question in the kind of very challenging times that we have now. One of the important lessons that we should all learn is the urgency, the need to actually come back to our roots. When we speak of dharma, we have two levels of dharma that need to be understood and generally is less understood within our ISKCON society, but to speak of outside of our ISKCON society. But dharma means, of course, on the spiritual level, evoking or awakening our original service attitude and relationship with Krishna. That is called Bhagavat Dharma. On the material level, there is also what our acharyas refer to as material swadharma. The material swadharma is to live in accordance as Krishna has designed, as Krishna has arranged through Bhagavad Gita, through the instructions given in Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. The natural way for us to live is on these principles of sustainable living, self-sufficient living, which is best done, can only be done actually in villages, because the perfect ideal economy, one of the four sciences that is taught in our Vedic culture, that is part of what is called Chatur Vidya. That is what is meant to be learned actually in Gurukul and Varnasrama colleges. The fourth of those four sciences is called Varta, or the science of economics. And what is the science of economics? It is unknown in the world today. The science of economics is based on the Krishi Goraksha Banijam, Vaisha Karma Swabhavajam. That is actually the perfect definition of the science of economics. So yes, all of our devotees, whether here in India or all over the world, need to actually understand this long-term objective and goal of our society and the movement of Lord Chaitanya. Lord Chaitanya's movement is to preach the message of Bhagavatam, is to preach the message of Bhagavad Gita, and that needs to be seen, that needs to be experienced, that needs to be lived on these two levels. On the spiritual level, by chanting the holy name, practicing devotional service, and on the material level, by living the way Krishna lived in Vrindavan.
That's a great explanation, Maharaj, that how this Nama-hatta congregational preaching is nothing but to take forward the mission of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and which is very much can be done and should be done with our agrarian culture and Varnashram. So sometimes we can hear from also devotees that, okay, Prabhupada told about book distribution is the best service. Book distribution is the dearmost service to Prabhupada, or constructing temples for him, big temples, or deity worship, or these and that. So I am a book distributor. I am doing the best service to Prabhupada. I am a pujari. I am doing the closest intimate service to Radha Madhav, or I am a temple doing temple construction. So can you also throw some light on this? That how Nama-hatta and congregational preaching consists everything. How it's or is it just another separated preaching style, or it consists everything together?
Okay, that's another good question. So all preaching activities and all activities of devotional service can bring us to the perfectional stage of life, and when done in proper consciousness is pleasing to Guru and Krishna. I need to briefly, very briefly, how much time do we have here?
Uh, we are actually toward the end of our conversation,
Yeah,
so but yeah,
okay.
we can go ahead. No issue.
Yeah, I just want to introduce something which will be food for thought, I think, to our devotees, whoever may be listening in. But I was mentioning about Gita Nagari, the essay Gita Nagari. I strongly recommend all of our devotees to read this book, Gita Nagari, and maybe as a follow-up to that book also, then another very important book called Speaking About Varnasrama. Because in Gita Nagari, Prabhupada speaks about 4 phases or 4 movements, whereby the mission of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and the mission of Lord Krishna, which is the same mission ultimately, will be successful. What are those 4 movements? You touched on a few of them actually a few seconds ago, Prabhu. The
Yes.
first mission, Prabhupada, he calls it the Sankirtan movement, referring to the chanting of the holy name and book distribution. Sankirtan movement. The second movement that Prabhupada speaks about in his essay on Gita Nagari is the temple worship movement. Means after we distribute books and chant the holy name, people are attracted, we need a place. So that second movement is a temple worship movement where we establish a temple. The third movement that Prabhupada spoke about is spiritual initiation movement. These are the exact words that Prabhupada has given in that book, Gita Nagari. Spiritual initiation movement. And spiritual initiation movement actually refers to congregational preaching, where we cultivate people, train them, and bring them to the point of actually becoming committed by taking formal initiation and diksha. The fourth movement, there is a fourth movement that Prabhupada spoke about. He called it classless society movement. And he's referring to Varnasrama Dharma. Varnasrama Dharma, whereby we organize the whole of society as Krishna directs in the Bhagavad Gita. Chatur Varnyam Maya Sristam Guna Karma Vibhagashaha. This is the reality in the material world. Even our foremost of acharyas, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he explains how Varnasrama is that system for Vaishnavas who are still in their conditioned state. So that means that the Varnasrama we find all over the place in the Shastra, in Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, Varnas and Asramas, and therefore there is a need for congregational preaching, which is the third phase, to connect with this fourth phase, which has yet to happen within our ISKCON society. That's a whole topic in itself, as I mentioned, and I would love to speak on that at some future date, but because we're at the end of our session here, I will just keep it at this point. Yeah.
Yes. So we are given some more time, so
Okay.
we can churn this topic a little bit more.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah, I got the message here till 12:30. So if I can just 1 or 2 small points, and I would love to, of course, hear comments or maybe get questions from those who might be listening. See, Prabhupada's mission, Lord Chaitanya's mission, actually, of course, is to flood the world with Krishna consciousness and to bring back, to revive Vedic culture, isn't it? And if we understand how important is this aspect of agrarian living, agrarian life, because actually, I want to give a small reference that you can find in the Mahabharata. It's a very important instruction given by Grandfather Bhishmadev. Grandfather Bhishmadev is speaking to Yudhishthira Maharaj, and he's explaining to him that there are 3 fundamental gifts of nature given by the Lord. When these 3 natural gifts of nature are properly cared for, when they are not neglected, when they are not abused, when they are not exploited, then society can function nicely. What are those three gifts of nature that he speaks about? The first one, and telling, I'm giving them to you in the order that Grandfather Bhishmadev is giving to Yudhisthira Maharaj. The first one he refers to, the first gift of nature are cows. The second gift of nature is land. And the third gift of nature is knowledge. Knowledge we can understand as culture, Vedic culture. So the world today is being threatened by us being influenced in so many different ways, but in being enticed to leave the more traditional lifestyle of village life. This way, Gandhi, Prabhupada refers to Gandhi as having a very clear, very good understanding of what Prabhupada coined as village organization. So Prabhupada also, you may know, he wanted, he wrote to some of his disciples, I want to come to India and I want to go from village to village. I want to save our villages, from being attracted to this modernized, industrialized way of life. So as a society, it's an area that in many ways we have yet given proper attention. And, if you look at a place like America, North America, US specifically, at present, because of this ongoing industrialization, mechanization, modernization, 90, more than 95% of the population in America is disconnected with villages. You see. In India, when I came to India in the 70s, probably 90%, if not more, of the population were in the villages. Now that population has come down from 90% to below 70%. And there are predictions that within a very short time, the global percentage of people living in villages will come down to 50%. This is actually very, very serious in that it is uprooting us from our original, we could say, sources or more natural way of living. It's a major topic which Prabhupada spoke about, and I just want to reiterate again to our devotees. There's a book that was commissioned. We speak about this. A conversation we're having is in the context of congregation. Many devotees may not know that in 1996 was a very important year for ISKCON because we celebrated Srila Prabhupada's centennial. Prabhupada appeared 1896, so 1996. 2 years before 1996, approximately, the leaders of our society, the GBC, they commissioned a group of devotees to do research on congregation, on community. So a group of devotees got together, and then by 1996, they presented their findings. Their findings actually appeared in a book that is now available today, that is being published by our ministry here in India, called Speaking About Varnasrama. In the introduction of that book, the devotees who did the research, they mentioned that actually we could not speak about congregation, we could not speak about community development without speaking about Varnasrama. Because Varnasrama, for example, if we speak about sociology, one of the courses we have on our, Varnashram College online is Vedic sociology. Vedic sociology, according to our acharyas like Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Srila Prabhupada, is nothing other than Varnasrama culture or Varnasrama dharma. So it is of utmost importance for us as devotees to and this group of devotees who did the research, they came out with all of these very, very important statements that Srila Prabhupada made in connection with Varnasrama Dharma. Varnasrama Dharma encompasses everything, because that is, it is the standard, universal, and eternal system that Krishna has created. So therefore, my humble request is that, especially those who are preaching, for example, Nama-hatta, because we're speaking about, the topic today is about Nama-hatta. So those who are preaching Nama-hatta, there's a real need for Nama-hatta devotees to connect, I would say, with the whole Varnasrama concept. And I know this is a little bit controversial in the sense that Varnasrama is something that is less understood, and that would require a complete separate session in itself, as I mentioned. But this is my humble request and my little bit of realization that I have, and I'm just trying to convey to our devotees how just maybe summarizing and concluding on this presentation of these four movements that you can find in Gita Nagari. If you read the Gita Nagari and get a clear understanding of these four movements, then more easily we can make this connection with congregational preaching, which ultimately congregational preaching does cover everything, but it needs to cover everything within the context of village life and rural living. That would be my point.
Yeah. So this four movement you talked about: Sankirtan movement, temple worship movement, spiritual initiation movement, and classless society movement. So are there like some kind of one by one periodical, or like this, it can coexist?
They are meant to coexist. It's not that we go from one to the other and the other one disappears. they always coexist. But what's important to know is that they are meant to develop in a phased manner. In other words, for example, I'll give you a small example. When Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, after performing Harinam Sankirtan in the residence of Srivas Thakur, then the devotees said, hey, we've been doing this for 1 year. We cannot keep this to ourselves. We have to take it out in the streets of Navadvip. So Lord Chaitanya in this way began the Sankirtan movement by congregational chanting in the streets of Navadvip, isn't it? And Lord Chaitanya also inspired our Goswamis to go to Vrindavan, isn't it, to excavate the holy places. And what they did is they wrote transcendental literatures. So from the holy name came books of the Goswamis. And then they themselves, they inspired people who actually built temples, isn't it? The 7 major temples of Vrindavan. And then people started to congregate. They started to become serious, took to the chanting of the holy name. Very similar thing happened when Prabhupada went to New York. Prabhupada, he went to Thompson Square Park with his cartels, and not even a mridanga. They chanted. They attracted people, and people started to come to their 26 Second Avenue. So Prabhupada started like this, the first movement, by introducing the chanting, by distributing his Back to Godhead magazine. Went to the second phase where he established temples. After New York came San Francisco. After San Francisco came Montreal. After Montreal came Boston, like that. And then after establishing temples, then people started to congregate, and we had new Bhakta training program. People were trained to become full-time devotees, to take initiation. So that congregational development, Namahatta, happened as well. And then the fourth movement, Prabhupada also started in his time with New Vrindavan as the first congregation. And Prabhupada wanted that we establish more and more of these communities. So in this way, these four are meant to coexist, even in a village, for example, where people are living the ideal village, Vrindavan village. Prabhupada said, you go by bullock cart with books from village on east side, west side, north side, and south side. The same activities of chanting the holy name will continue. The same activities of book distribution will continue. The same activities of training individuals and congregational meeting will happen, but it will happen within this natural setting, which is a village setting, which is the ideal village, as we mentioned, that Krishna and Balaram demonstrated personally. Yeah. And this is most important. I'll just finish on this point. We have an urgent, very, very urgent need. You know, there's a movement that is in many ways more active than we are, and they're not devotees. Ecological movement. One of the very well established since the last 50 years is called what is it? They are promoting basically this same ideology of eco village. Eco village is based on the idea of self-sufficiency and sustainability. We are in modern day times, we have strayed away from that. We have given that up. And Prabhupada was very disturbed and very emphatic in directing our devotees and directing our society. Prabhupada said, I think many devotees know about this 50% of Prabhupada's mission, which has yet to be taken up, which is actually Varnasrama. So this one organization that is called Global Eco Network, Eco Network, they have thousands, hundreds of thousands of people who understand that modern day development, modernization, globalization that we are all experiencing. And one of the results of all of this unnatural way of living is what we have all experienced beginning in March last year or January, this COVID-19. So this COVID-19 is a result of us as a people, I mean, as a global community, living the wrong way, isn't it? And therefore, there are important lessons for all of us to learn and to understand, because we're not living the way, both spiritually and materially, that we are meant or designed to live, as given by our acharyas, as written in our shastra. Therefore, we have all kinds of, difficulties and crises in the world. So I would like to urge devotees to read these two simple literatures that I mentioned, Gita Nagari, which is written by Srila Prabhupada himself, and this, as a matter of fact, I'll mention this point. Our ministry here in India, 2 years ago, we printed 3,000 copies of this book speaking about Varnasrama, and we are giving a complimentary copy to any temple who will accept the book on the condition that they will give 1 hour a week to read the book to the devotees and to their congregational members. It's a free book. Yeah, it's a free book that we have. We've already given to a number of temples, and devotees should know. You can just approach our secretariat in Mayapur, and this book is 100% simply instructions given by Srila Prabhupada.
So that's a wonderful explanation of yours, Maharaj, as well. So one nice question from one devotee, Mahamaya Devidasi Mataji. She is asking that it's so nice to hear from you, one of those pioneers of Nama-hatta in ISKCON, talking about establishing a proper culture as the next step. I am from the West, and here Nama-hatta is only an weekend gathering. How should we look forward in establishing a Vedic culture as our outlook? Please guide us.
Yeah, very good question. Nama-hatta is not meant to be a weekly affair. Nama-hatta is meant to actually bring us to that understanding of our Vedic culture, which is a daily affair. And part of that daily affair is actually living in a congregation where we are growing our own food, where we are not dependent on a system and a society that is going in the wrong direction. And Prabhupada has mentioned to all of us, modern day society is a doomed society. modern day civilization is a doomed civilization. And Prabhupada has mentioned this on many occasions, that what we see today in the world will not continue indefinitely. Prabhupada was walking, I believe, in Detroit, and he took his cane. A group of devotees were with him. He pointed his cane to all the buildings around him, and he told the devotees, these buildings will not be here after some time. It means that modern, just like so many civilizations have come and gone, now we're living in this modern, industrialized civilization, which has come, since the days of what we call the French Revolution and the Industrial Revolution that took place a few centuries ago. We have been on a major deviation since those days, and it's high time for our devotees to wake up and understand the deviation that is taking place. And definitely anyone who's a member of the Nama-hatta activity can understand this even easier. And when connecting in this way with these kind of statements that are being made by Srila Prabhupada, and with these literatures that Prabhupada has given us, which is right and left actually all over the place in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Srila Prabhupada is speaking about this more simple and natural lifestyle that we're meant to live 24/7, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, not just once a week. Okay.
So I am an individual person, a devotee of Krishna consciousness movement, but I stay in a remote place, in my village, or maybe my remote city, or some small city or place. So where ISKCON devotees are not coming very much for preaching, or not at all. So if I am interested to start a small community there, or to start preaching there, so as an individual person, so what will be your instruction as a beginning stage? How should I start off?
Beginning stage is to chant Hare Krishna. Beginning stage is to actually connect and to get training, to be educated in the basic principles and concepts of Krishna consciousness, and to gradually come to understand about what is dharma. And I'll emphasize this point again. Unless we realize and understand these two eternal levels of dharma, Bhagavad Dharma, which is the dharma of the soul, and Varnasrama Dharma, which is also an eternal dharma. Varnasrama Dharma, many devotees may not understand. It is an eternal system that Krishna has given. Why? Because it is connected with Prakriti. It is connected with the modes of material nature. And if anyone has read properly Bhagavad Gita, out of the 5 basic tattvas, the 5 basic principles explained in the Bhagavad Gita, namely Ishvara, Jiva, Kala, and Prakriti, and then the last one, of course, is Karma. The first 4, including Prakriti, which means the modes of material nature, which means Varnasrama, are eternal principles. So therefore, if you're living in a remote village, wherever it may be, you connect with devotees as much as possible. Try to be with devotees slowly, gradually, by being trained up, by being educated. Then according to every situation, every place will be different. Taking the good guidance from senior Vaishnavas, then one can begin to introduce these basic concepts. Prabhupada, I'll just close on this point also. If you're living far away, if there's an opportunity to be part of what Prabhupada wanted all of us, all of our centers in the world, Prabhupada gave us, this is a standing instruction given by Srila Prabhupada that we have yet to take up actually. Prabhupada wanted that every single center around the world establish immediately a Varnashram college for that very purpose of training our devotees in these basic concepts and principles of Varnasrama Dharma, which very much involve or include also the whole concept of congregational preaching. I hope that answers the question a little bit.
Yes, of course, Maharaj. Also, recently I visited at one village in West Bengal, and we went for a preaching program there. And one devotee is trying to preach there, and some villagers, local people, they also started to chant. And so now they have a nice temple there. of Lord Gopal. Nice whole temple. So again and again, everyone was meeting me, was telling me, please take this temple. We want to give it to ISKCON. We want to give it to ISKCON.
Yeah.
So on from according to my realization, what I was trying to say them is that okay, it's nice you want to give it to ISKCON, but the thing is that it's your temple, the Lord Gopal, and then we had a class there. We were discussing the story of Madhavendra Puri and Gopal, and how Madhavendra Puri had a dream of Lord Gopal in his. He came in his dream, and then he woke up from the dream and he called the villagers, and he even Chaitanya Charitamrita says that Gramera Ishwara Tomar. So he is your Lord.
Yeah.
He's the Lord of your village. So go and bring him and worship him. So then how do we what do you say to them, these villagers, that okay, how should they come forward and they should take care of that worship and the service of Gopal, and to inspire them in congregational development?
Yes, this is one of the important aspects actually of the Nama-hatta program, is to give an opportunity to local villagers to actually take up seriously Krishna consciousness, to train them to the point of taking initiation, creating some local brahmanas who can, from their village, actually take up the responsibility of worshiping the Lord in their village. ISKCON cannot, ISKCON is not meant to become like a real estate agency where we take up, where all the villages become registered under ISKCON. Yeah, I mean, temples can receive direction, of course, and association from devotees from our larger centers, but ultimately, this is the Vedic system, is that there is meant to be a temple in every village, and generally there are meant to be trained up individuals in the village who will look after their temple, who will be serving their Lord, and who will receive the mercy of their Lord.
So I have two more questions, last question Maharaj will take. So we've got two questions. One question from Kumar Prabhu from our social media, that there are statements from Srila Prabhupada saying Varnasrama is not important, and at other times saying Varnasrama is to be established. Maybe they were intended to a different set of audience. So my question is, how a person at present to understand which is actually is hour of need and hour of action item for the devotees as a general instruction, or can we pick up whatever instruction we like?
That's the last thing you should do. The last thing we should do is pick up whatever instruction we like. We should follow what our Acharya, Srila Prabhupada, is telling us. We should have an overview. We should understand all of the different instructions. Prabhupada did, on a few occasions, minimize the importance. As a matter of fact, one time he said, Varnasrama is not so important. But if we look at all of the instructions, the overall message that is given by Srila Prabhupada, he very clearly, very emphatically emphasized the need and the importance of establishing Varnasrama. It's if you look at the conversation recorded just a few days before Srila Prabhupada departed in Vrindavan in 1977, he refers to Varnasrama even at that moment. So throughout the Bhagavatam, throughout so many purports and whatnot, therefore, it's important to speak to those who have a more clear understanding about the Varnasrama Dharma, and how, in so many ways, it is the need of the hour, because of the way we have been living. Vast majority of people are totally dependent on the modern day system, as I mentioned today. And Prabhupada made so many statements clearly mentioning the urgency and the need actually to establish Varnasrama Dharma. So my suggestion is that you speak to those devotees who have spent a lot of time studying and who are actually also involved in promoting and establishing Varnasrama Dharma. Yeah. And last question.
So another question from Anupama Kumari.
Okay.
Yes. Bhakti is Swaraj. So why we need to relocate into village? Why Varnashram cannot be practiced in the cities?
Because we can chant the holy name in the cities, but the more natural and standard way of living is actually villages, as I mentioned. And also because if you read Prabhupada's books or hear his classes, Prabhupada says very clearly, as I tried to mention a little earlier, that the cities as they are existing today will not be there for a long time. And therefore, Prabhupada at one point mentioned, we don't want cities. We don't want these kind of cities. Cities as such are not necessarily bad. I mean, Dwarka was a city. Hastinapur was a city. Cities, Vedic cities are ideal. But we don't have Vedic cities. And even when we had Vedic cities, the majority of people were living a more simplified lifestyle in the villages. That is the standard. If we want to actually connect with Krishna, it is easier to come to this understanding that if we don't return to this more natural lifestyle of villages, then we will also be doomed, even as devotees, because we will be caught up in a system that is destined to collapse. And it will collapse very soon. Prabhupada said, you know, this motor car civilization will only be here 50 years. And he said that approximately 50 years ago. Draw your own conclusion.
Thank you for the, Maharaj, for your enlivening conclusion and discussion. So there is a comment of appreciation from Seva Swarup Prabhu. Dear Maharaj, thank you for your profound and clear explanation and of congregational development through Varnashram Dharma in villages. So yes, Maharaj, we are very much grateful to you for your wisdom and knowledge, practical knowledge, which is not only some kind of just theory, but you yourself are practicing, and you yourself are trying to establish the Varnashram and villages and congregational development since the beginning till now, and we hope that you continue for decades and many more years to come, and
yes,
and you show us the path, you keep on guiding us as usual, as always, eternally.
If I can make just one last quick point.
Yes, yes.
Actually, I'm in South India right now, in very close to Udupi, and we just started a Gurukula here called the Sayadri Parashuram Gurukula, and we have our own website as well. Through this Varnashram College online, that you're part of that as well, we are stressing three very important things that I would like devotees to just keep in mind, and I will close on this. Our goal and our objective as devotees and as a society is to actually focus on three vital aspects, two of which have to do with education. Number one is to establish Varnashram colleges so that we can understand what is Varnashram Dharma and where ISKCON is meant to take us. Number two, in order for that long-term vision to actually materialize, we also have to establish very quickly Gurukulas. Number one, Varnashram colleges. Number two, Gurukulas, traditional Gurukulas. And number three, we have to establish villages. Already there are many villages in India. That's a great fortune of India. And the Nama-hatta devotees are already going in the villages. We have to make these villages as ideal Vaishnava Vedic villages where we live as Krishna lived, depending on the land, on the cows, and cultivating our primary goal in life to become Krishna consciousness. So my humble request, these three areas, which are directly connected with the instruction I was sharing a little while back of Grandfather Bhishmadev, are of utmost importance and urgently needed for all of us and for the whole world, actually. Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you very much. So for our audience, for our viewers, we would like to say that as our take-home messages or take-home resources from today's conversation, a few things in brief is that, okay, you can also follow us on our website, ISKCON Congregation, ISKCONcongregation.com, to follow the different updates and resources regarding congregational preaching Nama-hatta, like Maharaj mentioned about Bodhram Kalpata with that book. You can find all these things and you can collect those books from the website ISKCONcongregation.com. Also, as Maharaj mentioned about Varnashram, so you can also follow the website varnashramcollege.com to get the updates of different courses and different things on Varnashram. Also, the book speaking about Varnashram and the Gitanagari article essay, those things also you can collect. So, and you can do your homework and more questions, more queries, you can connect with us, which is congregation.com website and also Varnashram College with Maharaj personally. So on this note, we are at the end of today's wonderful enlivening discussion. And we are again grateful to His Holiness Bhakti Raghava Swami
Thank
Maharaj
you very
for
much,
his
Prabhu.
valuable, precious time.
Haribol. Thank you very much, Prabhu, and all the best in all of your preaching activities, and all glories to Namahatta. Haribol.